Hello.
Hello.
Hi. Hello, Nyree.
Hi, Ara.
I don't know what's going on with the login, but it's not allowing us to have a live directly. So thank you for setting up the live on your side.
Gladly.
Let's, it's gone down to 13 people, so let's give it a minute for people to come back. How are you doing tonight?
Doing well. You?
As well as we can be.
Considering the reality we're living in, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, we've got a few people trickling in. So the 301 account has been blocked from doing lives because of, I'm assuming, mass Azeri bots reporting the account. So we tried logging in 4 different ways on different phones, and it literally is telling us that 301 is blocked from doing any lives for the time being. So
that's not good.
It's not good, but it's not surprising. We'll put it that way.
Not at all.
Yeah. How many people do we have now?
I have 66 on my side.
Oh, okay. It doesn't show on my side. It shows 10. So if we've got if we've got 66 people, and then I'm assuming 10 on our side, we should be able to get started. You're hosting it, but I'll be asking questions. Thank you, Nyree. Sorry, I'm trying to get things back in order now that we've gotten through the live being back up. I'd like to thank everyone for joining us. This is a ARS hosted event instead of a 301 hosted event on Instagram Live. I'll be your host tonight. I'd like to ask everyone to, I mean, most of you are already followers, but everyone who isn't, on all platforms, please follow 301, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, naturally, as well as ARS. I believe you're logged in with the official ARS account.
Yes, I am.
We are currently doing a fundraiser for the ARS Solar Artsakh program. So make sure to click on the fundraiser and donate. We currently have 0 donations and $0 raised as of the first minute of this event. But it's a very important fundraiser. So I recommend everyone who's thinking of something to donate to definitely utilize this time, and we'll talk a little bit more about it as we move forward. But it's right there on the screen. So please follow 301, follow ARS, and donate to the Solar Artsakh program that the ARS has been hosting for a while now. And you can tell us how that's been going. To get things started, I mean, I'll give a quick intro to the ARS, but I'd like you to expand on that as well as yourself. So the Armenian Relief Society, for those who don't know, who are just tuning in to follow a live of 301s or the ARSs, it was founded in New York in 1910. At the time, it was called the Armenian Red Cross. It has entities in 26 countries, and it has a membership of over 15,000 people today. It's an independent, non-sectarian, philanthropic society serving the humanitarian, social, and educational needs of Armenian and non-Armenians alike. Before we continue with a little bit more about you, Nadia, I'd like to know if you have anything you'd like to expand on what the ARS is, what their mission is, what the general focus is, because we'll get into the specifics about the organization and what you guys are working on.
Sure. Just, well, first and foremost, thank you to 301 for hosting this event. And thank you for also hosting a fundraiser for Solar Artsakh. So the ARS is an organization that basically does philanthropic and humanitarian work all over the world, wherever there is an Armenian community, as well as helps non-Armenians alike. We've been around for over 112 years now, 13, we're going on our 113th year. It is an organization that has passed through every Armenian household from generation to generation. And it's amazing how a majority of women that are members of this organization stand by it and make the impossible possible.
Absolutely. And I know a lot of people in the organization. I've known of the organization for a very long time. And I recommend everyone look more into the ARS and how to get involved, not just with fundraising, but actually doing the work through the ARS. A little bit about Nyree, who's here as our guest, even though she's hosting this. You're a lifelong activist. You've worked through many different organizations. You're from LA. I'm also from LA. You spent a lot of time going through a lot of different organizations in the Armenian community, but for the past few years you have been focused on the ARS, and currently you are the executive chairperson of the ARS. If you'd like to tell us a little bit more about not just your experience in the ARS, but what your focus specifically, essentially running the organization, or helping run the organization, I should say.
Sure. Well, my central executive board and I got elected in October of 2019. One of the unique things about the ARS is that its central executive board is elected every 4 years and has a term limit of 2 terms. From the day this executive board got elected, we have just been dealing with challenge after challenge like no other. I mean, from diaspora to the homeland, whether it was in Lebanon, whether it was in Syria, whether it was the 44-day war, whether it was COVID, and of course, Artsakh. So we haven't been able to take a breath. And we've honestly raised probably over $7 million in aid, whether it's shipments to the homeland, shipments to Lebanon, or fundraising. And the other unique thing about the ARS is our membership and our organization does not keep the money. We spend every dollar that we receive for the projects that we plan and we implement.
When you're saying $7 million, I just want to frame that. Are you talking about since 2020, or are you talking about since 1910?
Since 2019.
2019. Okay.
I can't calculate what we spent, what we've collected and what we've spent since 1910. I'd have to go year by year and look at.
Impressive statistic to share, because again, the ARS is not an organization that came about in the 90s when Artsakh was liberated, or when Armenia became independent. To your point, to the background of the ARS, it's been around since 1910. It's been a very long time. It's done many things over the decades, over the century. And when you're saying that we've raised $7 million, you're talking about a very finite, short period of time. It's the recent period. So I just want to make sure that everyone understands that $7 million is essentially just the past couple of years. And I mean, there's a lot of questions I have about what ARS is currently doing, having to do with the Artsakh war, post-Artsakh war. If you don't mind, I'd like to pepper you with a few questions for you to give us some insight as to what's going on, not just in Artsakh, but in Armenia, and what you guys are doing as an organization for us to know about, as well as for us to help with. So ever since the blockade, what has been the ARS's focus? What have some of those challenges been that you guys are facing? And what has, separate from that, what has the ARS been working on ever since the Artsakh war? I mean, those are very general questions. I'm sure you have a lot that you could expand upon on any of those. If you want, why don't we start with post-war, naturally, you guys have been working in Armenia and Artsakh for long before the Artsakh War, this latest Artsakh War, but ever since September 27, 2020, what has been the situation and how has that impacted the ARS? And how the ARS impacted Armenia and Artsakh?
Ara, I would like to modify that question and talk about what we did during the war.
Absolutely.
Because our activities for our aid to Armenia and Artsakh did not start post-war. In fact, the Central Executive was on the ground in Armenia during the war, the 44-day war, as well as our two entities, one which is in Armenia and the other in Artsakh, actually. And during the war, what it was promptly getting the needed medical supplies to the front lines, purchasing a ambulance that could actually climb hills and mountains and deal with the rocky terrain of Artsakh. It was visiting wounded soldiers consistently on a daily basis, visiting families of wounded soldiers and those who had been martyred, supplying food, blankets, clothing to all of the Artsakhis who had been forced out of their homes without any prior notice. And in fact, even our kindergartens and the supply, because we do have, at the time we had 8 kindergartens in Artsakh, whether it was in Stepanakert, Shushi, Karega, Ashan, Agnapert, Khansaristan. We turned those into shelters where people could come and have safe haven during the war, and if the food supply was running out, we were using that food supply to feed those who were in Artsakh. And unfortunately, at the time, what ended up happening is all of Artsakh got emptied out basically into Armenia. And so our volunteer members were going and visiting various hotels, various villages where the Artsakhis were. And then post-war, unfortunately, we had to turn to monetary donations again. And we started passing out $1,000 per family on a 4-month period so that these families could pay for rent, could have food, and eventually move back to Artsakh. During the war, I would say we had numerous shipments of medical supplies and other clothing, other necessities that we were having difficulty finding in Armenia, shipped to Yerevan, even though we had quite a difficult time taking a lot of those supplies out on a timely basis. We were able to do at least 11, maybe 12 shipments from all over the world. So come post-war, we started in 1992 or 93 actually, we had started an orphans program because of the first war in Artsakh as well as the earthquake. Mm-hmm. And the Central Executive Board decided to change the name of this program to something positive versus calling them orphans. We started the Children of Fallen Heroes Fund. And for $330, anyone could adopt a kid whose father or mother was martyred during the war. And there's a lot of interesting tidbits which we'll talk about. But the most interesting thing when I was in Artsakh a month and a few days ago. I was asking questions about how is the program going, and our coordinator and the chairperson, Lili Mardirosyan, said, Nyree, do you realize that a majority of the children that have been accepted into this Children of Fallen Heroes program are children that were in the program originally because they had lost their fathers. Now they've lost their husbands. And that was just devastating to hear. Other than that, we started the Solar Artsakh program. We kicked off Solar Artsakh in March of this year. And the reason being is because there was a fear of the gas being shut off. So we kicked off the program, and we've actually installed 101 solar hot water heaters till this day in 17 different villages, 101 families, 544 residents. And it's quite interesting because it's a different task for the ARS. The ARS is used to going in, doing short humanitarian aid or programs that, are touchy, and we move on. Now we're actually putting infrastructure in. We are cutting that tie with our neighbors so that we can have an independent water supply.
It's necessary at this point. I mean, whether it's energy, water, internet. Everything goes through the Berzor corridor, the Lachin corridor, and we've essentially lost all of the independence that we had as Artsakh. So I mean, water is definitely, hot water is definitely an important one. We're seeing today what's going on with the blockade. Just human movement is impossible at this point, let alone when they decide to cut off the gas, cut off the electricity, cut off the internet. So it's, yeah, I mean, infrastructure is going to be a very important part of the future mix of philanthropic work. So thank you. You guys have definitely been at the forefront of that. And I want everyone to understand the situation that the Armenians in Artsakh find themselves in, and the type of work that needs to be done through ARS as well as through different programs that are working on the ground there. You mentioned education. You mentioned, and I want to speak specifically about Artsakh, but education from reading the mission of the organization as well as looking into it recently. It's an important facet of the ARS. You mentioned kindergartens that you guys have in Artsakh. What has the impact been to those kindergartens ever since 2020? And more so, what has been the impact to them over the past few weeks? We're going on a month right now where there's a full blockade. I mean, separate from the food supply shortage, medical supply shortage, all the other issues that Artsakh is facing, there are over 30,000 children there. What is the impact to these schools?
So I don't know if everyone's heard, there was an announcement made today that the schools in Artsakh will stay closed for one more week because of the supply shortage. And in reality, so in 2020 we had 8 kindergartens, and after the war, I'm not going to say it ended. After this elongated ceasefire, we now are down to 4 kindergartens, and sadly 4 of our kindergartens were not even under fire, or they were nowhere near any enemy attack when they were taken or handed over. But the reality is, the impact is that these kindergartens mostly are 4 kindergartens, whether it's in Khansaristan, Ashan, Agnapert, or Stepanakert, cater to the Artsakh families that were either relocated and are forced to live in other regions because they've lost their homes, and or they are families whose fathers or mothers have perished in the war, or generational from the first war on. So the reality is, those kids rely on the sustenance that they receive at our kindergartens. They need that nutrition. They need that educational sustenance as well. It's just not only nutritional. And it's kind of odd for us at this point in time, because we're used to supplying the population during a crisis out of those kindergartens. And now, I was informed earlier today that if the kindergarten was to open tomorrow or this morning, because it's Monday in Artsakh, we would have 1 week's worth of supply left. When in fact, we usually keep, enough supply so that if we go to war, we can actually supply the public. So it's detrimental, and it's dangerous.
That's an understatement. Yeah. It's horrific. I mean, anyway, I mean, we can talk about that on a few different levels. But thank you for sharing that on the kindergartens. You mentioned also that you were there in December. Does ARS have permanent offices and people in Artsakh as well as Armenia? Yeah. Have those been impacted? I mean, are you getting news directly from ARS representatives that are working in Artsakh right now?
We actually have a chapter in Stepanakert. with a permanent office in Stepanakert, which most of the population of Artsakh knows. We get direct information from them, as well as, we get information from 301 as well, and different news sources. But one thing's very interesting about our members in Artsakh. They are amazing. Instead of us comforting them, they're comforting us, saying, "Don't worry, we've been through this, and things will get better. Things will get better." And they're unique. Artsakh, the population of Artsakh is unique, and especially the women in Artsakh. They're just unique with their positivity.
Given the circumstances, that's absolutely amazing. And all I ever hear, and I've been to Artsakh, but I've never experienced Artsakh where the people post a horrific issue like this. So I haven't seen them at the worst of times. But all I ever hear, especially now, is how resilient the population of Artsakh is. And we know what they went through in the 90s, late 80s and 90s, and we know the type of people that came out. But especially now during the blockade or post-war, the positivity and the resilience, I feel like, is a common thread in everyone's discussions about Artsakh currently, as well as their experience so far, anyone who's visited. And you were there in December.
There's one thing that we need to realize, is that this generation of Armenians in Artsakh was the younger generation during the 90s, during the war in 90s. So this is what they know.
Yeah.
And this is what they've come to know. That even though we lived in this peaceful, pseudo-peaceful world for 30 years, they knew that this day was coming, and they have somewhat prepared. I mean, is it right? Is it right that we're facing a blockade? Is it right that ARS, which is an internationally recognized NGO with the United Nations, can't get supplies through? Is it right that the UN rejects every appeal, or that ICRC says, you know what, we're going to only take ill people through the border and not bring humanitarian aid through? Is that correct? No.
Can you expand on that? So what has the communication been with the United Nations since you guys are an NGO registered with them, and your work has been touched by the UN in many different capacities? But what is the current rationale for the UN's disinvolvement, as well as the inability of the UN to facilitate anything for the ARS? Forget about just Artsakh and the people in Artsakh and the rights that they have as humans. But the ARS specifically, what has been happening over the past few weeks? Forget about post 2020 war. What is the current status of the ARS trying to get their humanitarian supplies through with the UN's help?
There isn't one. So every request we've made has been unanswered, has been ignored. And basically, I think the United Nations has deaf ears to to the reality that's happening in Artsakh. I think even the UN headquarters in Armenia have deaf ears to the reality of the situation. And it's sad, because here you are as an NGO that has been working at the UN and partnered with various different UN entities since you became a member. And we pay dues to be a member. It's not a free membership. We pay dues to sit there in meetings and listen to various different UN activities. But they just don't want to hear our voice. And the reality, I hate to say this, comes down to politics. It comes down to politics. It comes down to what the ANCA has been saying. It comes down to the reality that Armenia, as a representative country in the United Nations, and the Armenian NGOs need to ask for the same thing. And in the reality, we're getting conflicting asks. When we're saying we need humanitarian aid, Armenia is saying sanction Azerbaijan, not asking for humanitarian aid. And that's the sad reality. There are hundreds of NGOs from Armenia who have status with the UN and ECOSOC. But the reality is they're there for their self-interest and not the same interest as all of us. So it needs to be a unified front. In fact, you know, we've done tweet campaigns. We've done all these different things. I think we need to tweet at the UN and let them know who the Armenian population in the diaspora is and in Armenia, and turn around and blow it up so much that they have no out, they have no escape. It doesn't matter if they use the ARS or if they use any other organization. They have the capacity to get the humanitarian aid through the blockade.
And there's
They're the only organization that does,
absolutely.
other than a foreign government.
Absolutely. I mean, I mean, what you're saying with the complete absence of accountability of the UN or any of its members when it comes to what's going on today is I don't know, disgusting. I don't think it's astounding. I can't believe that you guys have reached out and are just being completely ignored. And I'm sure that's the same for not just the ARS, but other organizations that are working for Artsakh also. And to your point, Armenia doesn't have a shortage of NGOs. And the fact that all I'm seeing or hearing is Azerbaijan is bad, they're a bad player, and we need to sanction Azerbaijan. I mean, of course, there's the going after the Azeri government and the individuals running Azerbaijan, and those are things that the ANCA is working on, the ANC globally, and we spoke with Geva Skadjan a few weeks ago on the work that he's doing on getting other countries to understand what is taking place, but that political. The political solution is one. There's also this humanitarian catastrophe that's taking place that's part of the same issue. And the fact that they're not able to at least pretend that they're working on the humanitarian side while the political side is being or pretending to be worked on. That's what I'm having a very hard time understanding or seeing any logical rationalization of that. So from what you're telling me, both sides are just being completely ignored, and how there's zero accountability when it comes to this is beyond me. And you're experiencing this day to day, so I'm assuming your the feelings around this are a lot more amplified than mine even. I did not know that you guys are getting completely stonewalled by the UN.
You know, we've been so stonewalled that we've even been negotiating to say, hey, what if we were to go into Armenia, purchase food, purchase nutrition that is needed in Artsakh, whether it's, you know, vegetables, whether it's whatever it is, except for the meat, because apparently there is no shortage of meat in Artsakh, thank God. But the other necessities, including medical supplies, what if we were to hire somebody and drive it across the, you know, from Goris to a thing? What's the worst that's going to happen? We're going to get blocked. We're going to get told turn around. But once again, I mean, we're not your large scale organization. We're your grassroots organization that works like a lion. But when you have someone with the resources like the United Nations who is blatantly ignoring this situation, it's getting frustrating.
It's more than frustrating, and I'm not living it like you are. So that's completely unacceptable. And I hope everyone who's tuning in and listening to this really understands the gravity of that. I mean, forgetting about the UN, to your point, forgetting about the government of Armenia. I mean, if you guys are taking it upon yourselves to be able to take that food and procure it yourself and take it over, and you're essentially being told that's not even possible. There's a complete breakdown of we'll just say what's being sold as the goals globally of the UN and what the reality of it is. That's absolutely horrific. And what happens tomorrow? Let's say the blockade opens up. I mean, we discussed this earlier. Well, maybe we didn't discuss this specifically. I mean, you have the only road that connects Armenia to Artsakh under Azerbaijan's control, essentially. I mean, sure, there are Russian peacekeepers there, and they're making sure that the Azeris don't go into Artsakh, what's left of Artsakh, and just slaughter all the Armenians. But they have complete control of not just the road, but also the utilities. If this opens up tomorrow, what is the ARS's next step? Is it just taking care of this immediate humanitarian issue and try to get sustenance back to the Armenians until the next blockade? But what is the forecast that the ARS has right now for what's currently taking place, as well as what the next steps are for Artsakh, essentially? What are you guys preparing for? Naturally, the Solar Artsakh program, that's something that will continue, and as many people that donate to that, the homes will continue to get hot water throughout Artsakh. But it's obvious now that there are more important, not more important, but issues that are directly affecting the ability for Armenians in Artsakh to live. The multifaceted question, sorry. Yeah.
So the outlook is this, that if the blockade were to be lifted tomorrow, our volunteers in Armenia are ready and willing to go to Artsakh with supplies and help the public out. I mean, that's the simple, small scale solution, right? Until there's another blockade at this point. But the reality is that we as a diaspora, and I say this, we as a diaspora, honestly, we need to think further than that. We need to think infrastructure. We need to think how we can improve one's lifestyle in Artsakh. And there's one thing that we're missing here is, how has Artsakh survived an entire blockade for 29 days in Artsakh, 28 days in the US?
Yeah.
And yet the governmental rations are just going to be opened up come tomorrow. They made that decision last week. It's because Artsakh planned for this. They plan for it every day. They know in the back of their mind, whether it's not immediate for them, it's coming. And they know that they haven't been living in peace as everybody thinks. When those of us who have gone after the war and seen Artsakh be beautified and be peaceful, it really has never been peaceful. The war, the ceasefire was just that. It was never really a true peaceful agreement and a ceasefire. I mean, I've had the luck of being in Artsakh in '92, and I've had the luck of being in Artsakh in December of 2020. So I've seen both extremes. I was there, in fact, when our delegation, including Central Executive Board member Hames from Armenia and Armenia ARS Chairperson Maro and I, the three of us were there for between December 2nd and December 5th of this month. We witnessed the first mini blockade of Artsakh. And that should have been the warning to all of us to be prepared for the next coming. It's like we keep getting these warnings and we keep ignoring them. And we literally had a week's worth of time to prepare.
And can you go back for those listeners who actually don't know what happened the first week of December? One, what took place exactly? Two, what was that experience of you being there while it was taking place?
Well, the thing was, so Saturday morning or Saturday mid-morning, the same group of Azeri supposed activists or environmentalists decided to block the Lachin corridor. Mm-hmm. And they blocked the Pertsor corridor and they stayed there, just like they have now. It took several hours for the Russian soldiers to open it up. If I'm not mistaken, it was between 4 to 6 hours. But how was it being there? You know, honestly, I felt safe being in Stepanakert. And I was happy that I was there and I was witnessing this with the public. And the population of Artsakh, life just went on. They ignored that reality. To them, it was like, oh, the Azeris are trying to stir up problems. Let's move on and do what we need to do. They went on with their day-to-day lives. They went to the grocery store. They bought their food items. They went and picked up their kids, or they took their kids somewhere. You know, they prepared their meals and so forth. So it wasn't that outlandish, or it wasn't something that was so dire. And then, of course, I come back to Los Angeles a week later, and when I land, I hear, wait a minute, Artsakh is blockaded again.
And you reminded me of something I heard just the other day. It was, I believe, Sean Charchafian, who is a repat from LA, who lives in Artsakh in the Mardoni region. One of his Facebook Lives, he said something I really appreciated. It was, Artsakh is not blockaded or isolated from Armenia and the rest of the world. It's the exact opposite. The entire world is being blockaded and isolated from Artsakh. And that is, to your point, it seems to be the way Artsakhi's look at what's taking place. They are prepared for this. They have been. And the barbarism and terrorism of the Azeris is something that is absolutely expected from them, but they have a positive spin in terms of their outlook of what's taking place, and I've come to understand that more as I see what's taking place and what's unfolding. It's again, it shouldn't be that way, but it absolutely is. You touched upon the orphans in the first Artsakh war, and the ARS's efforts at starting a program for them. Is that, again, there's a lot of different things taking place right now. The situation is very different. Back in the early 90s, Artsakh was liberated, and the people were finally able to breathe as an independent nation, not under constant threat of the Azeris post-war. This is somewhat the opposite of that, with similar circumstances where you still have a lot of martyrs in Artsakh, as well as from Armenia. But those living in Artsakh, to your point, these were the children of the original martyrs, and they're the ones being martyred right now, or the family is. Is there a similar situation with orphans or children of the fallen heroes? Does the ARS have any plans of addressing that too? Or is it just one of many things that the ARS is juggling today?
One of many things the ARS is juggling today, Ara. It's like, you know, it's been one of those years, or a couple of years, where we're just juggling numerous different humanitarian efforts. We've tried, you know, I'm gonna expand a little, and I'm gonna change it from there. We've tried partnering with different organizations to see how we can actually sustain more help and make our dollar and our literal dollar multiply, because we have various different organizations come in. And I think there was somebody in chat who actually asked the question, why don't you partner with different organizations? Not going to name them for you, but we've attempted it. And unfortunately, it didn't work out the way we wanted to, in the sense that everything went to sham. And in fact, there were plans post-war when we announced that we were going to pass out funding to families, $1,000 per family, and we actually funded $1 million plus to over 1,000 families. The ARS was actually the only organization that came through and said, you know what, here's the $1 million, we're going to hit 1,000, and we actually hit more than 1,000 families. And, you know, it's not one of my proudest moments, because I don't believe that humanitarian aid is best served by handing out cash, but it was the necessity. I believe that our kindergartens, our solar water project, those are the important things that we should be doing, because they actually make a difference in the lives of the residents. And my hope is that the future government of Artsakh, or the current government of Artsakh, and everyone around us will understand the importance of being free from Azerbaijan when it comes to, like you said, the internet, electricity. So let's build those solar stations where we can supply various different villages with solar power and cut off that supply chain from Armenia as well as Azerbaijan, because it's going through the Pertsor corridor. And once we do this, once we set up this infrastructure, they're no longer that threat. That threat disappears.
Yeah.
They cannot cut off our electricity. They can cut off our gas. It doesn't matter, because we've turned the entire country green.
Yeah.
So it's time to think differently on when it comes to Artsakh. Look, the people of Artsakh are really proud. They don't want a handout. Let's be honest. When you try and give them aid, they don't look at you like, oh, give it to me. They look at it like, you're giving me this. Why? Because I can't do it myself. I can do it myself. And, the interesting thing is, I'm going to give you guys an interesting thing with an ARS member in Artsakh. She doesn't work for the ARS kindergartens. She actually works for a government kindergarten, and she's the principal there. And this is the essence of an ARS member in Artsakh, because Artsakhis are very welcoming. They always open their homes and so forth. But what Anahid is doing in Artsakh right now is, because the kids can't go to school because there's no nutrition, and the parents, and a majority of her parents, work in the medical field, she's opening up her home to a pseudo daycare center where she'll feed them, she'll keep them warm, so that the parents could go to work without worrying about it. And this is that essence. I mean, this is what Artsakh really is. It's neighbors helping neighbors consistently. And if we can't find it in our hearts as a diaspora to stand with them, then we failed our biggest victory in the last 100 years.
Absolutely.
We don't deserve it.
And expanding on that, this isn't just the first victory in the past 100 years. It's been a millennium of consistent loss for Armenians. I mean, whether it's Giligya or whether it's the entirety of the Armenian highlands. I mean, our history for the past millennium, more or less, has been of loss. This was the first time in 1,000 years, plus or minus, where we had a win, where we took something back, where we safeguarded our people. And to your point, I mean, I think about the families of the martyrs all the time from the First War, and how if this is allowed to just be gifted away, to be squandered, everything that we lost as a people, we gained as a people, as well as lost in terms of the martyrs and the lives. It's not 1 or 2 or 100 or 1,000 during the First War, as well as this one. It will be all in vain, and I can't understand how people don't see this. Artsakh was the first bright light in our recent history, and I mean we have a few thousand years of history, and it has not been positive for the past 1,000 years. Yes, the genocide is definitely the peak of that negative outcomes, but Artsakh, to some extent, throughout the 90s and 2000s, chipped away at that. So this situation today, what we find ourselves in, essentially 75% of Artsakh being gifted away, more or less, depending on how you look at it. It's absolutely horrific, and my personal feelings is that this is it goes against everything that we gained in the 90s, and where if we aren't able to help the Artsakhi's today, and try to right this wrong, think this will be in vain. So anyway, enough about myself, but and how I feel. But the ARS's work is not just commendable, but should be the template for all these other organizations. And when you say that you have worked with other organizations, we don't need to get into the names. I just read the comments that you were referencing. I haven't heard anything from any of these organizations other than Azerbaijan is bad. The fact that the ARS is actually doing the work and these other organizations are just tweeting or commenting publicly how they are against what's taking place, that really puts things in perspective for me as to the types of organizations they are versus the ARS and other ones. I mean, you mentioned the ANCA. The ANCA absolutely is doing its part, but I'd like to say thank you, but I know you're not doing this for a thank you. The ARS is not doing
Ara,
this.
I'm not here to blame the others who aren't doing anything. They've done what they can do at their capacity. And the reality is you don't, my thing is, yeah, donate to the ARS because we do what we say we do. But if you don't want to donate to the ARS, donate to the Artsakh support body. That organization
Absolutely.
does well.
I donate to
Donate to
them.
Shant. Donate to Shant,
Shant's
Lorik
organization is the
Foundation. I
Lorik
mean,
Foundation.
Shant heard about our solar project and he goes, I'm going to help out. I'm going to do it my own way. If people don't donate to you, they'll donate to me. At least we'll get it up. And that was the whole point of the Solar Artsakh project, was to get people motivated to do it.
Absolutely.
The reality is that there's 3,800 Armenians that don't have gas lines in their homes in Artsakh. They just don't have that. The gas line hasn't come out. They still live with wood stoves, which is great. But in reality, it's not because it's unhealthy. There is over 4,000 to 5,000 Armenians today in the villages that are in need of these solar water heaters. But imagine if we had an Artsakh with 80 to 90% of solar energy and solar water heating. And it can be done. A lot of the hotels, most of us haven't noticed it, that have gone. But since we started this project, I've noticed most of the hotels in Artsakh run off of solar energy, solar electricity, solar water heaters. And a majority, and they're now along the villages in Armenia, you're seeing it more often. So it's doable.
Yeah.
We just need to improve.
I'm a solar developer. My expertise is in solar electricity, not water heating, but I've been in it for over 20 years at this point. So absolutely, microgrids are a necessity for Artsakh at this point, and that's positive news to hear that the hotels and the larger facilities are adopting it, essentially to mitigate the electricity just being shut off. I mean, Artsakh does not have the hydropower plants it used to. Those were all in Karvachar. So we've essentially gifted away both the water and electricity infrastructure that we had in Artsakh. So that's positive news you're giving me. It's anyway.
Let's hope there's more positive news, and in the upcoming days, if not tomorrow, we get the news. We all go to sleep. We wake up that the corridor is open and the blockade has been lifted, and we get on to instead of sitting here and talking about a blockade, we can come back weeks later and talk about what we did after the blockade and how we improve the lives of many in Artsakh.
Absolutely. From your mouth to God's ears. Thank you to the ARS for everything they have done and continue to do. I want to make sure that everyone understands that the ARS is actively fundraising and actively spending those dollars, every single dollar, on these infrastructure projects in Artsakh, whether it's the solar Artsakh for water heating for individual homes, which you guys have already installed over 101, you said, as of this point.
And we're hoping to start the next phase of 100 soon.
That, as well as the kindergartens that you guys run, which act as essentially safe havens, not just during war, but for sustenance for the people. The ARS is always doing its part, and I want to make sure that everyone who can does donate to the ARS, as well as other organizations. I mean, Nyree, you mentioned a few. The point is that there are organizations that are helping in Artsakh today, and then there is a lot of other organizations and NGOs that are doing their other things. So in my mind, prioritizing Artsakh is it's a no-brainer. So I wanted to thank you as well as the organization for everything you guys are doing. I want to make sure that everyone who is following ARS naturally continues to do so and tries to help out in any way they can. But there's a lot of people who are followers of 301 who may or may not have heard of the ARS. Please follow them. And they have chapters everywhere. This is not an organization that's run from the top and they have a few token offices to pretend that they do. They have chapters in almost every Armenian diasporan city, as well as in Armenia and Artsakh. So please do your part. Join. It's an organization open to everyone. And to your point, it helps not just Armenians but non-Armenians. Please follow 301 on all different platforms. Follow ARS similarly. 301 is an Armenian news source for Armenians, paid for by Armenians. It's not funded by foreign governments. It's not funded by foreign NGOs. It's an organization that is trying to get Armenian news to Armenians, not foreign news to Armenians. So please follow, donate to ARS, to 301, and let's hope that the plight of the Artsakhis, as resilient as they are, comes to an end sooner than later. Thank you, everyone. Yep. Thank you, Nyree. I really appreciate your time. Sorry and for everyone who tuned in a little bit late. We started late because the Azeri troll farms, I'm assuming, mass reported 301, and 301 is unable to hold live sessions on its own at this moment. That should go away quickly. But thank you to the ARS for hosting this and quickly adapting to that situation. Thank you, everyone. I appreciate it.
Thank you.